Hello, and welcome to the Student Ministry Conversations podcast with your hosts, Russell Martin and Brent Aiken. This podcast is all about equipping, encouraging, and inspiring youth pastors weekly with topics that are brought to the table by youth pastors from all over the world. And now, here's your host for this week, Brent Aiken. Hey guys, welcome back to Student Ministry Conversations. I am your host, Brent Aiken, and today I'm sitting down with Chris Coker. And so I have known Chris for a while. I definitely don't want to steal his thunder because Chris is he's a youth ministry dude. He's been around for a while, does children's ministry as well. And so I'm going to let him explain the where and the why and all about him. So Chris, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, Brent, first of all, thanks for letting me come in on the podcast, and hopefully I'll be a resource and a blessing to those who listen. I encourage you guys to check out all the other ones. They're really awesome. So, like Brent said, I've known him for now probably almost 10 years.
I was going to say close
and
to
we've
10
only
probably.
We've only actually met each other in person like less than 5 times. But we have this great group of youth guys that get together and we just talk life with each other. And so for me, that's been something that, as we get into the topic of today, that's something that actually has recharged my batteries over the course of my ministry time. So I grew up in a small town in Salem, Indiana. Shout out all my Salem people that may hear this podcast later on. Small town in southern Indiana. After that, I went to Ozark Christian College. I got my degree in Bachelor's of Biblical Education with an emphasis kind of on youth ministry and family. I started off in some like really small towns. Like if you sneezed more than 3 times, you missed the entire town. One of them was in Cashin, Oklahoma. I spent 3 years there. And then I spent the better part of 14 years in Kansas City, doing family ministry on both the Kansas and the Missouri side. And now here in the last 7 years, I get the honor of being able to be the youth and family pastor and associate and online person and social media. I get to be a lot of everything. I'm a master of none, and that kind of slogan there. But I had a really awesome ministry here, and really blessed to be able to share some of the things with you guys today.
Yeah, awesome. And of course, you do have a wife and some kids, so tell us about them as well.
My wife, we've been married almost 18 years. She's a school teacher. She teaches 5th grade. My kids are now both in high school. So please pray for me, especially since both of them want to start driving at the exact same time. One of my kids is actually taking driver's ed this week. And so when I grew up, small town, I never had to navigate interstates and on-ramps and those kind of things. And so be praying for him, be praying for us as we turn the reins over to him a little bit and let him kind of start making that journey toward adulthood. So, but yeah, my family's great. I've been blessed by them, and it was really honored to be a part of their life and for them to be a part of mine. So,
yeah, well, definitely awesome. And honestly, that could have been a podcast episode by itself. Having 2 high schoolers that your kids in your youth ministry, like, definitely.
I'll tell you, there are times that they struggle. That is a struggle because they know their dad, and sometimes they want to be youth pastor and answer all the questions that nobody else asks because their dad's going to ask those questions in a few minutes. And so there's kind of that running joke in our times, like, well, you want to be the youth pastor today? And they kind of hush up and move on. So
yeah. Well, kind of jumping into the topic for today, you already kind of touched on it a little bit with the group that we have with different youth pastors that are pretty much all over the country. There's like 7 in Texas, 1 in
Illinois,
1 in Iowa, and like
California,
maybe 1 in California and 1 in Arkansas. So it's a Texas group with a few other states around us. But no, with that being said, though, I totally second what you said about the whole recharging your batteries with this group. To this day, it's something that I was super thankful for. And it came in a time that I was very, very much wanting to quit. It came in a time that like my church wasn't for me. I was so far away from family that we couldn't use them as a resource. And it was a time, and I got on one of the Facebook ministry groups. I don't remember which one it was. Might've been Youth Men, back in the day. And I was just like, hey, I really need to talk to people. Does anybody want to get on a Google Hangout and just like talk about faith, family, and ministry? And like, man, what that turned into after that was so cool. And yeah, but that ties in directly into our topic today about recharging your batteries, both spiritually and emotionally. And what does that mean? What does it exactly mean to recharge your batteries?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, I mean, we focus every day on recharging things, our phones, our computers, our iPads, all those kind of things. We recharge every day. In fact, we desperately search for the cord to plug in to recharge us. But a lot of times when it comes to our own emotional well-being or our own spiritual well-being, our physical well-being, we run around like we can just go forever, like the little Energizer bunny. And on our phones, we get like that little low power alert, 20%, and then it goes down to 10%. And then if you've never plugged it in, you just keep going, it eventually turns off. And so a lot of times you can look at kind of burnout and being drained in ministry is the same way. As there's seasons of life where you need to recognize that alert and say, oh man, I'm running low here, or I'm almost tapped out. And like you said, Brent, you were at a point where that group recharged you, that re-energized you, that allowed you to plug in not only to community with other people, but with God as well. And so that's when I think about recharging my batteries, it's like taking time, and we can talk a lot about the different steps that you can take to recharge your battery. Just like with cell phones, there's not the same charger cords don't charge every phone, right? And so for us, I mean, for what might recharge me might deflate you or just drain you. I know there are some people who are introverts by nature, and being around people drain them. For me, I'm just the opposite. I'm an extroverted person. So you put me around people, you get me in conversation with people, and that re-energizes me, that jazzes me up. And so you have to realize what kind of person you are, and whether you're introverted, extroverted, whatever, to find out what may be best to help you recharge your batteries. So right now, for a lot of us pastors, we're in the middle of a season of camp. And sometimes for some people, camp really re-energizes people's, their faith and their time with their students. And for others, it's draining. And so, if camp's a time for you to re-energize, get after it, get into those camps, re-energize with people, connect with other youth pastors, those kind of things. And if you need that downtime, like I know there are some people who go to camp and need 3 days comp time afterwards just to kind of recenter themselves, get themselves back to normal before they can keep going. So.
Yeah, sure. And so you kind of brought it up a second ago, but you talked about burnout and how that is, I mean, if we're honest, we're still sitting in one of like probably the worst periods of burnout, at least in my lifetime, of the past 30 years. And I'd argue that it's probably significantly farther back than that. And the thing is burnout is very, very much affecting, pastors. We're seeing people drop left and right, from youth ministry to children's ministry, senior pastors across the board. And so how can recharging your batteries, work to help avoid those burnout situations? And do you think that the past couple of years, most of the burnout and most of the quitting we've seen is because people just kind of put themselves off the charger and never allowed themselves to recharge?
That's an interesting question. I think there are some people that the monumental task of a complete shift in ministry from in person to online stuff, they just were not capable of handling that big shift. I mean, that's a shift that none of us saw coming 2 years ago. and they just were ill prepared for it. And so I don't know about you, but when you're ill prepared for something, and you're expected to be the expert at it, and then you get criticized for it, then that can definitely lead to burnout. I mean, I've read several studies that it's not the amount of hours that we put in. I mean, we could put in one week 100 hours and next week 20 hours, just because that's the way ministry works sometimes. But it's that idea of discouragement that burns out more people than anything, any other factor. It's that constant discouragement. It's that dripping water, just on the roof, just constant. It never lets up. And so sometimes that's self promoted, like you do things that leads to discouragement, and other times you hear one voice of discouragement and it drowns out all the other people that are trying to encourage you. And so I think that's really what it boils down to, is that some of those time periods during the middle of the pandemic, people were discouraged. I mean, people nationwide, worldwide, were discouraged. And so you got pastors that are discouraged, you got people who were discouraging other people, and it was an avalanche of discouragement. So I think that's got a lot to do with people that have stepped aside from ministry. And if you're listening to this podcast and you said, man, I'm done, I'd encourage you to say, maybe you're done for a season, not done forever, because God has called all of us to ministry, and it's not just necessarily vocational ministry in the church, but we all have a ministry. We all have a gifting and a talent that we can use wherever we're at. And so maybe you step aside from paid ministry for a period of time to open up new opportunities for ministry in another area that you would have never expected. For me, there was a time period in my life when I left the Oklahoma City area that the church went through a split, and they couldn't pay me and a pastor anymore. And they said, well, we got to keep the pastor and the youth guys got to go. They didn't want to. They did everything they could to keep me around for as long as they could, but that kind of caught me flat-footed. I didn't know what to do. I was discouraged. I was lonely. Didn't have anybody. In fact, I had to move out of the parsonage that the church provided. So I was also homeless. And so I go from a ministry to now having no place to live. And I move in with a friend, and I just go work at Walmart, because, every town's got a Walmart or a Target or a place, and you didn't have to have any great, skill sets. They could, if you can scan a barcode nowadays, you could have done what I was doing. And I hated it. And I just felt like I was in this spiral, and I was like, I'm never going to get in ministry again. This isn't fair. And one of my friends, who was a mentor of mine, he said, try to look at this as like a rose in the desert. A rose can bloom up out of tough times. And so it was during that time while I worked at Walmart that I met my wife that I've been married to for 18 years. And so through that whole time, I was struggling. I was wondering if God was even wanting me to be in ministry anymore. But I just kept trying to be faithful and trying to serve. And an opportunity opened up for me in Kansas City. And as Paul Harvey would say, that was the rest of the story.
And that's good. That's real good. And I think that's something that we kind of overlook. We kind of feel like when we're called to ministry, like it's permanent for the rest of our lives. It's like, no, everybody's called to ministry. You don't have to be called to a profession of ministry for the rest of your life, but you are called to minister to people wherever you are. And so I think a lot of times we use that almost as in like a guilt factor to kind of keep us driving through burnout, for the nature of sometimes we feel like there is no other option. Like there's no plan B. God wanted me in ministry, so I'm going to stay in this church, and hell or high water, like I'm going to be here. And sometimes that doesn't work. When you hit
sometimes that's incredibly toxic, not just for the church, for your family, for your children, for your own physical and spiritual well-being. I mean, it really is.
Yeah, burnout can lead to extreme toxicity, not only to yourself, like you said, to your family, to your church, to the staff at your church. There's so many different places that can be a negative deal. And that kind of goes into my next question of how do you go about setting boundaries to recognize when you're getting empty before you run out? So like that low battery 20% thing that you were talking about on the iPhone, like how do you set that up in your life? Is there like a setting that I'm missing, or like what's going on?
Well, I mean, I think you're right. I mean, there are two kinds of people that I think about, like nowadays that gas prices are really high. There's kind of two groups of people. There's that group that fills up when it's a quarter of a tank. And then there's a group of people that are like, that light came on 4 days ago. Can I milk another day out of it? And that reminds me of what happened to Moses in the Old Testament. You guys remember in like Exodus chapter 18, he's camped, the nation of Israel, like, some 500,000 to 1 million people are camped out by Mount Sinai. And every day from the beginning of the morning to the evening, Moses is hearing the issues that the people are having. And it's hundreds and hundreds of issues. He's there all day, all the way from sun up to sundown. And his father-in-law, Jethro, comes and says, wait a second, I need to give you some advice. And he says, what you're doing is not good. These people who, it says in like Exodus 18, verse 17, you are these people who come to you only will wear you and yourselves out. The work is too heavy for you. You can't handle it alone. Now, Jethro, the father-in-law, said, listen up. Now listen to me, and I will give you some advice, and may God be with you. You must be the people's representative before God and bring their disputes to him. Teach other people his decrees and his instructions. Show them the way they are to live and how they are to behave. And then select capable men to be officials over the thousands, hundreds, fifties, and tens, and then have them serve as judges over the people. And so basically he was saying, there are people that you can lean in on to help you handle some of these smaller deals. And the big situations, those are the ones that you can be brought to, and that you can actually have the time and the wisdom to be able to solve those bigger issues. And so that just kind of reminds me, like, I know we talk about delegating all the time in youth ministry. We talk about it, but we don't do it very well. I'll be honest, there have been seasons in my life that I haven't done it well, because you sit around like, well, delegate to whom? Who am I going to delegate this stuff to? It's all stuff that you feel like that's my job or I have to do it. But there's a lot of things that you don't have to do. One of the areas that I have delegated away from myself now is actually our children's ministry check-in. And it's kind of funny because I actually have children checking kids in. So like I have our 4th and 5th graders are now checking families in as they come in to service in each Sunday morning. If they're new students, they know how to put the information in. If it's they have a series of medical questions and allergy questions, they can answer all of those things. And
awesome.
That takes that off of another adult leader or myself. If we're shorthanded, they can just do that themselves. And so, there are some things that we just, we feel like if we give over control of them, then we've lost control of things. And sometimes that can make us feel like we're burning out because we're like, I just can't even do some of the simplest things I used to do. But that's really a negative way to look at it, is that you need to be delegating some things, because honestly, we're not promised tomorrow. And so if our ministries are this only us centered, that's really a problem. And it definitely can lead to burnout for sure.
Yeah. And I would add 2 more to that, just for the nature of, sometimes you can't see that low battery warning yourself. And so if you are married, man, be honest with your spouse as much as you possibly can, because they're most of the time the most honest with you, and they're going to be like, dude, you're crazy. Like this past 6 months, whatever, you have been losing your mind over this little bitty simple thing, and you really need to figure this out, and you need to fix this. And sometimes they'll jump in and help. Sometimes they'll recommend other people to jump in and help. But a lot of times your spouse can be your best like early warning indicator of, hey, you really need to take a break, or you really need to try this differently because this is not working. And then the other thing is surround yourself with people that can mentor you outside of your church and inside your church, because people need to, you need to have mentors that are in the building, because they're the ones that will know the in and outs of what you're doing and how you're doing it. And then out of the building is like the Facebook, or like the little youth ministry group that we have. We talk through all kinds of problems and struggles and everything like that. And that sense of bonding over the years has helped and worked through a lot of different problems for all of us. But all three of those are super important. Find that external source that will help you with the low battery as well.
For sure. I mean, like you said, I mean, sometimes you can't, because you're so like a horse running a race. They've got the blinders on, and you can't see some of the warning signs, especially if you're young in ministry and you're 25 and you've gone to 7 weeks of church camp in a row. Someone needs to love you to the point to say, you need to not do that. In fact, maybe I can go the next time instead of you going for that 8th week of camp in a row, just because you got 2 kids there. You feel like, oh man, I just got to be there. You don't. I mean, yes, I understand camp is a place where you can spend the equivalent of a full year of ministry with them in a week. I get that. But there's sometimes where if you're burning the candle on both ends, nothing good is going to come from it, from the amount of time you spend in it. So
nobody gets filled from a broken cup.
That's true. That is absolutely true.
As far as like what you were talking about, we get so kind of tunnel minded, so focused. I always think of Balaam and the donkey, because Balaam was so hard pressed that this is how it was going to happen. This is what he was doing. And like, he doesn't see the angel so many different times. And that donkey's like, dude, get me out of here. Like, this is trouble. Like, I do not want to be here. But I think that's a really, really prevalent scriptural reference to the same idea of burnout. Like, sometimes we get so one track minded, and sometimes it's even like against what God's telling us to do. It's like, no, this is what we're doing. This is how we're going to do it. I need to do this. And we start this laundry list, and we're just checking off boxes of all the things we need to get done. We get so far down the road that we don't see like the warning signs. We don't see the like road closed ahead and all kinds of stuff like that, to where we have to have someone else that's pulling us, saying, all right, no, come on, let's get off of this track. You are going to crash.
Right. Like I said earlier, my kid's in driver's ed right now. And the driver's ed car is equipped with a brake pedal on the passenger side. And there are some times where we need people in our life, like you were saying, either inside the church or outside the church, or both, that can put that brake pedal on for us and say, hey, you're about to pull out into oncoming traffic, and it's going to mow you down. And I love you too much to let you get just buzzsawed by that car. And so, for us, we got to put people in our life. I mean, for me, I mean, Brent, I was just thinking about this while we were talking. In the 7 years that we've had that tribe chat on Messenger, I bet there's been over 10,000 messages.
Without
between all the ministers. I mean, we've dealt with some heavy stuff, and some just lighthearted, goofy meme stuff. Yeah, and that's fine too. Sometimes when you're run down and you see something funny, that's just that little, like you plug the phone in for just a second and got that little extra juice. It may not have refilled you to 100%, but it might give you that 5% boost, just to keep moving through that particular day. So.
Well, and I think there's a lot of truth in that too. I think sometimes when we hear the term recharge, we expect every time that we do it, it's going to be a full recharge. That doesn't necessarily mean anything. Like you said, sometimes we have to find the continuous points throughout the day to where we can continuously keep charging. Because I don't know about you, I will sit at my office and I might plug in my phone and let it charge for a little bit. And then I leave my office, I'll plug it in my truck. Then I'll leave, go home, I'll plug it in at home, and then I'll take it off, and then I charge it fully at night for the next day. And so
Right.
like there's this continuous thing of like, and it's not necessarily even that my battery needs charging. It's almost more of like the fear of running out in the future, that I'm just like constantly plugging it in wherever I go. But I think that's kind of a good preparation for us as well. I think you need to surround yourself with opportunities for recharge, no matter who you are and no matter what you do. You could be in a small church, you could be in a huge church, but you need to have those moments and those things that you can resort to regularly that might not give you the full charge like you were talking about, but maybe will give you that 10%, that 15%, whatever. And like you said earlier, that's completely different for everybody. For me,
Sure.
I have a ton of different things. I would say small, like having a cup of coffee in the morning is one of my small recharges. Like some days I don't get that, but it happens. Other days, like I get to go goof off with friends. That's a significantly bigger charge than having a cup of coffee. It doesn't always fill me up completely, but there are different sizes. There are different gauges that you can do. But the thing is being disciplined to regularly go back to those different charging stations. What are some of yours?
For me, I mean, it's changed over the course of my life. If you're a youth pastor and you got kids under the age of like 5th grade, it's a tough job. I know you're waving like testify. I got it. Like when my kids were that little, it was just watching a movie with my wife without my kids coming in and begging me for something. That was those little recharge, those little booster packs for me. For most of us, if we have kids, we're not in a situation where we're close to our parents or the kids' grandparents, and so you feel like you have nobody to babysit or watch the kids. And so those little date nights, we used to go to a dinner theater. One of the people in our church in Kansas City every year for Christmas gave us new dinner theater tickets, and so it would have some celebrity like the Al from Home Improvement was in it one year. But they said it's so important for you and Cindy to get a night out that you take these tickets, we'll watch their kids, and you guys just go and have fun. So I mean, just those little recharge things. When the kids finally went to school, I felt like it was like new opportunities opened up all around. It's like, oh, I can have a hobby again. Like, I can play church league softball, and I can play golf, and I can do a hobby. For me, one of the things that recharges me that I've done lately is I go to yard sales, and I pick up stuff and I flip it on eBay for a little extra side hustle. But it's not just I actually like building the relationships with the people, even if it's just a short amount of time. For me, I like to be around people, so I'm interacting with the people that I'm at a yard sale with, and so for me that charges me up. Service charges me up. Not just, I feel like sometimes when we are in ministry, we feel like, oh, well, I already serve here at church, so I don't need to serve anymore. I encourage you guys to serve in your own community some way. If you're in a small town, umpire some baseball games, volunteer to coach, do some different things in those communities that you can actually serve and help your local community. If you're in a larger town, I'm in a university town now, and so there's all kinds of things to do here. I mean, I got a pile of stuff on my desk, probably half a filing folder full of college opportunities for behavioral health and mental health stuff and crisis stuff. And so I've got all those kind of things. But for me, what charges me up is helping other people. And so for you, it may be reading. That does not charge me up. It actually puts me to sleep. If I want to go to sleep, I want to go to sleep. All I got to do is pick up a book, and it can be the most interesting, fascinating book on the planet. I'm asleep within about 20 minutes. And so, but for different people, they recharge differently. And so, just like Samsung phones charge differently than iPhones, we have to find what recharges us. And then you have to prioritize time to do that. I don't know if you know this or not, but we all have the same 24 hours in a day. Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, me and you have the same 24 hours in the day. And so we have to prioritize. We have to set some time aside to get some, to boost our energy, our emotional well-being, whether that's maybe it's putting it on your calendar. You have a meeting, and the only meeting that you're doing that time is you're spending time either reading, whether you're planning, whether you're doing something else that you can actually spend some time just doing something creative. Like we're working on a mall scavenger hunt, and so I'm going to prioritize some time at the mall this week. Stuff that I wouldn't normally do because I don't like going to the mall, but it's something that is a priority for me right now. And so, but you got to leave work. Sometimes when you lock the building up at night at the church, sometimes you got to let it go, put it down for the night and pick it up the next day. Now, of course, there's situations, where, if someone's in the hospital, someone passes away. But if you're on a staff of people, just say, hey, I'm not available during these times unless the church is on fire or, something really serious is going on. So,
well, and I think that's important because if you don't allow yourself the breaks when they aren't emergencies, the emergencies come and you're so spent that you're not there. Let's just be plain and honest. And I like how you talked about finding the different hobbies. Man, this goes back to episode 54 something episodes ago, because you're episode 59. This goes back 54 episodes to where I interviewed someone else from our tribe Facebook Messenger group, and it was Stephen Gehring. And we talked about pastoral care and taking care of ourselves and everything like that. And one of the things I mentioned in that episode was we work in an industry where we don't always get to see the finished product. Very, very much, especially if you're in youth or children's ministry. There are the occasions that come up where you get to see fruition from the first time you get to meet that student, to that student accepting Christ, to that student serving and leading and living out their potential. But that does not happen very often. And so one of the most encouraging and refreshing things that I was ever told as far as a hobby goes, is you need to find something that you can do start to finish in one sitting. And I was like, well, what's the point in that? And they're like, well, your entire profession is pouring in and pouring in and pouring in and hoping that these changes happen. But those changes might not happen in the duration of time that you see them. It might take 20 or 30 years for those changes to happen, but you need to be able to do start to finish projects as well, because it's something that we really, really thrive to have as humans. We want to see the finished product. And so our job does not allow that always. Sometimes we get to see great steps towards that final picture, but we don't get to see the end. And so whether that's gardening, whether that's DIY stuff, building stuff with your hands, I restore furniture. That's one thing that I love doing. I also do graphic design and websites, because that's something that I can sit down and it's done. And you make it, and you add and
go
tweak
live
things.
and you can see it, you can see
exactly
being done. So,
and that, even with the podcast, this is not why we did it at all. We didn't do it for us. We really felt like there was a need for an outlet for other youth pastors to get their voice heard. But same premise with this. This has been refreshing and encouraging for me, not only because I'm learning from every guest that I interview, but also it's because I get to see start, finish. I get to see the episode idea flesh out. I get to see the communication with the guest. I get to see the finished recording, and then we get to see the episode out, finished, finalized, published, and we get to see how everybody reacts to it. And so same premise. It's just finding that thing that you can see start to finish is really important.
For sure. I totally agree with that. One of the things I was thinking about as you were talking, we talk a lot about different hobbies and things that we can do to kind of help recharge us. One area honestly, I think if you were to rate the areas of like how to keep yourself from burning out, this is the top one. It's investing in your relationship with God outside of preparing for Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. Taking time to invest in your relationship with God. It's listening to podcasts, it's listening to sermons. I know this is going to sound weird in the summer when you're getting ready to go to another week of camp, but opening your Bible and just reading, taking that verse of the day from the YouVersion Bible app and just meditating on it and thinking about it throughout the day. Because how we said that some of these things that these little boosts in our recharging of our battery, it can never be completely filled with hobbies and rest and exercise and eating healthy and all that. It can't be fully charged without Christ, without God being the source of our energy and of our power and our endurance. It may be 90%, it may be 95% through all these other areas, but there'll still be a part of it that's missing. And so it's critically important that we invest in our relationship with God, and taking time reading books. If you're a graphic designer, I know you said you are, and I dabble in it too, just enough to be dangerous. But for me, like sometimes if I've got a scripture, that I've read or whatever, I might design something, a little scripture image so that I can share it out on our church's Facebook page or whatever. And sometimes that allows me to just kind of meditate on that a little bit more. Another easy way to keep constantly meditating on God's word is find a screensaver, a wallpaper on your phone, and put a verse out on it. And every time, because we open that phone probably 30 times a day, look at that verse, meditate through it. It's like, I had one recently, it was like, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. I saw that every day. And it's one of those things like I just preached on James chapter 3, talked about taming the tongue. And I had a verse on that because that whole week I kept wanting to think about and just meditate on controlling my tongue and realizing that the tongue is not the issue, it's the heart. And so I had Luke 6:45, out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. And so when it comes to recharging our batteries, we got to fill it. If we fill it with bad stuff comes out. But we need to fill our lives with God and with his word and in community. Not just because you work in a Christian community, but you need to be around Christian people outside of your church.
Yeah. And I think that's something that I will definitely say and speak to, that I've definitely had seasons of that. And I think we get so caught up in teaching these practices sometimes that we want to get so far away from them when we have time to ourselves. And it's not necessarily like, oh, I'm teaching in church on Wednesday and I'm partying at a club on Thursday or anything like that. But it's one of those things that like we teach it and we are encouraging students to practice this so much. And then we don't practice it in our own lives sometimes. And that's always been one of those things that just kind of, when I catch myself doing that, it floors me, because I'm like, really? I have the guts to say that like, this is important. This is what you need to be doing. And I'm not doing it myself.
And then you don't do it.
Yeah. I mean, the whole thing, practice what you preach. I mean, like, I think this is one of the biggest pitfalls of youth ministry, is not actually doing, especially when it comes to recharging and having Christ as the sole focus. And I've definitely been guilty for seasons upon seasons of this throughout my time in ministry. But it's something that I always either get an abrupt wake up call, or it's a gentle nudge that I'm able to kind of be like, oh man, like, all right, like recalibrate, get back on track kind of thing. But I think it's something that we all really, really don't do a great job at. Just because we get so,
you want to say the word busy, don't you?
Yeah.
But you don't want to.
No, I was thinking we get so categorized more almost because it's like, oh, this is church, this is life, like this is family, this is, and like we don't allow boxes to merge, but in the grand scheme of things, God is the box and everything else fits in that.
Right.
And
That's good.
so yeah, that was not me thinking, that just kind of came out. But with that though, I think that's important, is I think sometimes we try and box our lives so much to where it's like, okay, ministry time is here, now family time, oh, now I have a little bitty square of personal time over here, and then like we kind of put all these things in, and then by the time we fill our day, like we tell people all the time, like leave room for God, and then the grand scheme of things, we don't. Sometimes we feel like ministry work is our time with God. And like you said, that's
not the case.
That can lead to burnout faster than anything.
For sure.
So you talked about a few of these. I just wanted to kind of double check and touch on this because this was one of my questions as well. Are there any other practices that you personally do to avoid burnout or running on empty? You talked about a few, but I wanted to make sure that you didn't have anything else on that.
No, I don't think. I mean, honestly, there are seasons that when you're closer to burning out, like when you feel like that flame's kind of flickering, you need to do you need to change things up. Like in baseball, you don't throw a fastball every pitch. You throw a slider, you throw a curveball, you throw a changeup. And so sometimes you need to change things up, even if it's just like your routine. Maybe you do something completely different on a Tuesday instead of what you would normally do on a Tuesday. Or, for me, the seasons when I get burned out the most is when I am facing a lot of discouragement and a lack of support. And so I know that there are youth pastors that may listen to this and say, I just don't have any support. I don't have a support network to help me. Yes, you do. You have a group of people, especially in this conversation right here, that love you guys, that want the best for you. And we want to be a resource to you. I mean, there's thousands of different resources for just kind of even, like we talked about earlier, like recognizing that warning light. There's a few little quizzes that you can take to kind of see if you're getting close to burnout, like kind of what your percentage of burnout is. So it's like, it might be 25%, it might be 75%. But this quiz that I've used several times is really helpful to kind of help us maybe reanalyze some areas where we have been maybe burning the candle on both ends. But yeah, I mean, for me, a routine is what recharges me. Things being all out of whack and chaotic, that stresses me. And so I like routine. Other people don't. Other people like to change it up. But for me, the best is a routine that I kind of can get in and get moving and know, like you said, and have some things that I can check off that to-do list and say that is done. That is off my plate and on to the next thing. So.
No, I totally agree. I think, like you said, everybody's different and everybody has different things. And the big thing is finding those out. And you might have to do a little bit of self-exploration on that. Of like, all right, what are my hobbies? What do I really enjoy that I don't make time for? And make time for that. I love golf. Golf is one of my favorite things to do. I don't get to do it very often because golf is expensive, and yeah, church and ministry, not everybody makes good money, and I make great money. Just it's something that we don't make. It's not something that we choose to utilize regularly due to other constraints that we have. Sure. But it is something that, like, I know that that's a recharge, and so like I can plan a golf outing with friends 2 weeks out, and I am so eagerly anticipating that golf event like forever before it actually happens, because I know how much fun it's going to be. I know how much I look forward to it. And so finding those things that allow you to have that sense of excitement, allow you to have that sense of just recharge and refresh. But you did mention some resources. You talked about a quiz, but I was going to ask, and this is kind of as we're finishing and closing up, resources. Obviously, you said you have a few. You've used a quiz or two. What resources do you have? Where can they go to get help or find these resources? Feel free to share whatever you got.
Well, there's a couple websites that I've used quite a bit. One of them is a quiz that you can take, and you get some instant feedback and kind of an interpretation guide. Carrie Newhoff has a quiz called "At Your Best Burnout Quiz," and it's got some teaching in it. It's got some questions. It's got a whole interpretive guide of how, like, once you've taken the quiz, kind of interpreting what you've done. And there's another website called Pastor Soul, SOUL, and those will probably be linked in the bio of this episode. But and there's several others that I can share in the links below. But those are the two that I've really used. I mean, there's all kinds of books about back to the heart of youth ministry. It's an old book, probably back in the 90s now, which seems like it's 1,000 years ago. That's when I was in college. So, but it was back to the heart of youth work. And that was a really, really good thing to kind of keep yourself from burning out. So,
yeah, no, that's great. And I was actually going to recommend the At Your Best quiz, the burnout quiz from Carrie Newhoff. Me and Russell are both huge Carrie Newhoff fans, and we've both definitely read books and listen to a bunch of his stuff. The other thing is, like you said, find a podcast. There's a lot of podcasts that maybe it's not specifically addressing burnout, but even listening to stuff that makes you be better at what you do is a great resource to help you find new inspiration to tackle things, and find new methods of tackling things. And so Carrie Newhoff Leadership Podcast is one that me and Russell both listen to regularly. He has some fantastic people on there, a little more popular than we are, so he can pull some big time speakers. He's had Bob Goff and Andy Stanley and Ian Crone and a bunch of big names. And then just the mindset of, like, he just genuinely wants to help the leaders of this generation move forward. And it doesn't matter whether you're a church leader or a business leader, like his whole thing is just based on leadership. And we both really, really like that one. He has a lot of great content on there. The other thing is just hopefully our podcast is a resource to you guys. This is, like I said, this is episode 59. And so that means that there's 58
how old
episodes.
I am.
Yeah. So that means that there are 58 episodes before this one. And I probably would guess that our new listeners haven't listened to them all. And I'd encourage you to go back. There's definitely some great wisdom in all of these. And like I said, it's been one of the greatest things we've done, just for not only building ourselves up and encouraging ourselves to continue the race, but also hopefully to challenge you to do the same. And so, Chris, finally, outside of the resources, and like you said, we'll put a few extras in the comments section, in the show notes for this episode, but how can people connect with you on social media?
They can find me on Facebook, just Chris Coker. Instagram, Coker310. Those are the two ways that most people get a hold of me. You can email me at chriscoker@iowacitychurch.org as well. I'd love to be able to encourage any youth pastor that is really struggling right now, just trying to do that next thing. Sometimes the next right thing is to reach out for help and say, hey, I'm struggling and I need somebody to talk to. And so that's what we're here for. That's what this podcast is really all about, is helping youth pastors through a variety of different ways to help us continue to impact this generation. And so it's huge. I appreciate Brent let me come on and speak for a little while. And
yeah, well, that's awesome, Chris. We thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate your friendship, and the wisdom that you've shared over the years. And I'm looking forward to this wisdom getting spread as more and more people get to listen to this episode. Hopefully you find encouragement from this episode. We would love to hear that. Be sure to leave us comments. You can leave us reviews and ratings. That all helps us as we push the podcast further. But until next time, we will see you guys later. Y'all have a great week, and we'll see you on Thursday.